Thank you very much. Let me get my clock working. Otherwise, we'll spend the afternoon here. First of all, very nice to be here. Super thanks to the organizers, Victoria especially, for having me here. And as you can see in my name, and I'm from Finland, so there's an interesting connection here, of course. In Finnish, sarvas means a reindeer, which is not very much used anymore. But for you who understand Hungarian also, it means in Hungarian pretty much the same. And as we are in a museum, I must say that it's very nice to reconnect after 4,500 years with me bringing my last name here to share with you. But enough about that. Let's get to the topic of this before we go to lunch. And that's pretty much the end of my cultural history knowledge as well. So why the organizers asked me to be here is, first of all, this is what I've been doing, which is very far from museums and cultural history and all of that. My background is actually in engineering, software engineering, digital media, all that stuff. And I spent, before coming back to university life, I spent a lot of time as a design consultant and a design leader and helping big organizations change and working on how do you change organizations and what needs to be changed because of the digital world we live in, and lately, of course, because of this pandemic we also had to live in. Nevertheless, in my ancient history, before becoming a designer, I actually did my PhD on photography, snapshot photography in the early 2000s, which was a great time to start studying photography because that's when the camera phones came and all that. And so I've been actually working with a couple of museums about that. And one of the proudest things I really like was being a curator for a photography exhibition back in 2014. So actually I've been working quite a lot in studying consumer photography and pictures and archivals and museums and all that, which has brought me also, one of the things I have been doing in the past years is actually bringing together these two worlds, which in the other, kind of understanding how organizations work, understanding the basics of business, understanding how they are adapting to the changing world, but also talking with a lot of cultural institutions, their leadership, management, the people curating and doing the actual groundwork. So there's just a couple of examples I have done with my students as a university professor for a couple of projects, but also being involved in other projects and training. And actually giving talks like this quite often, which is great. So let's start my point I want to share with you here this morning. Let's start by what I don't think that digital is. And I hope this should be pretty obvious to everybody here, that anybody who has been working with building digital presence, having digital spaces and all of that, and bringing your expertise, your institution, your museum into it. That digital is not, at the end of the day, about having high-tech, fancy solutions as such. They can be important, but they are not the thing. But digital is actually very much about non-technical stuff. It's about ways of working. It's a mindset about thinking, how do you do things, thinking about the role of your organization. Of course, it's about competence. It's about what skills you have, what you can do, how do you understand things. But last but not least, it's very much about organizational structures as well. If you're a small organization, then it's kind of more easy to understand this and you can make changes and adapt to the digital, if you will, easier. But the bigger you are, and if you work for a big organization, then it's very probably tangible how you can see that some of the structures are stopping you from doing things that everybody knows should be done. Such as the earlier speakers here mentioned from Manchester, that there was the classical division of museums to educational and curatorial parts. So that's a structure, and that structure enables something, it might also prohibit something as well. So actually what I decided to go through with you is not so much about you, because I'm not an expert. You are the experts of the museum world. You are experts on how to bring cultural history to people. But actually what I'm telling you is what I've been telling the last 5 to 10 years to businesses Traditional businesses who have been established 50 years ago, 100 years ago, how are they going to change? And there's, of course, enormous complexity when you come to think about it. Think about your own employer organization, or think about some big business out there trying to change and adapt in the world because of digital, because of the pandemic, whatever other changes happening, because of globalization and all that. So rather than going to the complexity and the difficulties in it, I found that what has been missing is very much going back to the basics. So rather than just diving into the complexity, then why don't we just take a step back and start discussing why are we here? The similar stuff we already heard this morning. What's the role of your organization? Why does it exist? Who are we serving? And once we have those fundamentals ready, the basics, then perhaps we can actually start being more flexible, more responsive. We are more able to change and adapt to things. So here we go. Let's go back to basics. Here's the world you live in, isn't it? So the very first thing, whether you're a business or a non-commercial organization or whatever it is, there are two sets of goals that I think you should be aware of. You should be quite aware of the organizational goals, which are the ones here on the right, those stars on the right. This is where your organization wants to go. These are the objectives. That's what it's trying to do. And there's many of them. And you should probably understand them to a certain degree. The very first thing is that these are your customers, audience, user, whatever word you use. These are their goals. This is what they want to achieve in life. These are their aspirations. Whether it's another company you're doing partnership with, whether it's an individual, maybe it's a teenager you want to introduce to your museum, obviously they have their goals. Lesson number one, don't mix them. They're different. And I don't know if you have been in a situation, but very often people do mix them. They talk about, I don't know, do you talk about your audiences in the terminology of your own goals? That's mixing them. And the obvious example is that if we go out there and get a local teenager and talk, they will not talk in the goals of your organization. They will use different words and perhaps different worldviews. And in all simplicity, what you want to do, whatever is your, let's call it a solution, should be there in the middle where these meet. And one extra thing about organization and running organizations that this Venn diagram shows as well, you don't have to tackle all the goals of your organizations. Whatever you start doing, whether it's an exhibition, whether it's a marketing campaign, whether it's a new product, you don't have to tackle everything. And the same goes for your end users, your audiences. You don't have to tackle every single goal that teenager has. No, of course not. But whatever you do, you should be able to communicate, rationalize, and start designing based on the fact that if whatever we do in this space, it's taking us forward and it's somehow taking our audiences forward as well. So a couple of examples of how this works. Or actually a couple of examples how this doesn't work. I don't know, have you been here? That maybe you start something and you're tackling your own organization's goals, and then you spend money and time and brain power doing this, and at the end if the customer doesn't care, nobody comes to see, or maybe you somehow force them, but they're like, nah, it's not really. Obviously you can go totally overboard the other way. You could be super audience-centric and do exactly what people want to attract those young adults that we all want to come into places like this. But what if it's not taking your organization further? There's no value in it for you as well. So again, as a conversation point, just drawing these simple diagrams and starting conversations about them. So what does it look like when you are in the middle, when you're doing something customer-centric and something that is worth doing? So here's a project I was involved with as a lead designer, and this was the Helsinki City Museum. And they, here on the left-hand side, their goal was to change the whole, let's call it a dusty idea of what a museum is all about. That's what they wanted to achieve. But that doesn't really, the citizens of Helsinki didn't really care about that. However, they wanted to understand their city. They wanted to be immersed. They wanted to be entertained. And that was kind of the starting point for when we built the time machine for the Helsinki City Museum. By the way, a great project to build a time machine. If you make mistakes, you can go back and, yeah. And another way, let's put it into the snapshot exhibition, I said, with the Finnish Museum of Photography. So the museum, maybe you have this same goal as well. The museum wanted to interest and make themselves relevant for young adults, let's say people in their 20s. However, that's not really the goal of those young adults. Nevertheless, many of the young adults, when we started talking and interviewing them, there was a common shared goal that they want to understand this photography, this thing they do every day, this thing how they interact with other people, which forms an important part of their lives. And that was the starting point for the hashtag Snapshot exhibition back 7 years ago. So again, to summarize, this is the only thing I'm hoping you take from this. This is in all simplicity. Whatever you do, it should be right there in the middle, whether it's a product, whether it's an exhibition, a campaign, end result. And just really to hammer this in quickly. So when you talk about your organization goals, remember, if all your audiences disappeared, you would still have these goals. And vice versa, if you disappeared, your end users would have the same goals. That's the basic exercise of making them separate. And whatever you do in the middle, they exist only when you bring these two together. All clear and simple? To a certain degree. Tip of an iceberg in a complexity, isn't it? But hey, this is the world we live in, isn't it? For many things where we knew how things go, there's this fog. You can call it digitalization, you can call it pandemic, but things are under a fog. And part of the fog, when we put it into the Venn diagram, looks like this. The strategy keeps on changing. Maybe you didn't have one, and now you're working on it, and it's clarifying. Of course, the pandemic was a great example of just taking any plans and you had to redo them. And the same goes for your audiences. They keep on changing. You know, maybe something came up. Maybe there's a new streaming service to look videos, and hey, they're not coming to the museum anymore. So how do you do anything that's, everything is moving. It's a moving target, and your ground is moving as well. And that's, of course, we're not going to go in my talk today about this, but this is about when we go and listen to business literature or even fashionable things at the time. That's where these words, responsive culture, come from, lean startup way of thinking. It's all about how do you, as an organization, are able to move all the time, because these two things keep on moving. Another example, I think, that is especially just using these basic ways of looking into things and running your organization or working with your colleagues. Especially the more and more you do work, I'm sure you have different people from different backgrounds. Maybe you have that web data analyst there with the photography curator, there with the cultural history. That's another reason why I believe that just having these simple things and starting a dialogue, conversation with them in the beginning of a project or running a museum is very important. So one example, just to go over quickly, but let's say that, okay, you agree in your museum, let's put it this way, that let's have this Our Future this is our exhibition, it's right there in the middle. So the question is, can we do it? Do we have the skills to do it? So you can start drawing a third circle here. What are our capabilities, if you will? So whatever we're able to do is over there in the middle, because now we're kind of bringing into the discussion that we would like to do something like this, but can we do it? Which means that we have this space in this diagram that, we just at the moment don't have the capabilities to do this. Maybe we should recruit somebody. And if we put the stars over there, it looks like this. So what are our goals, the audience goals, and our capabilities, and where is the sweet spot about that? And this is also great starting conversations like these. This one over here, that's really important for us, isn't it? It's one of our goals. We can do it, it's inside our capabilities, but our audience doesn't care. And the other one is that our audience loves it, we can do it, but we really shouldn't do it. It's not in our mission, for example. So these become tools of having these conversations. Maybe, if you are the director of the museum, just talking with your people. What are you doing this month? And, where do you see fitting it in? And then we can go further, We want this, audience doesn't, and we can't even do it. And then my favorite is this. We don't need it, the audience doesn't need it, but hey, we can do it. You have to remember, I'm an engineer, so just being able to do things is a value in itself. Nevertheless, the point being that having the basics and starting these dialogues, I would call them, you can start asking questions and talking. How do you manage these goals and objectives? Like I said, recruitment, who should we get? What skills do we need and why? And how do we strategically build our competencies and so forth? Time to wrap up. So this is where I see you overlapping. I see pretty much any organization on this planet overlapping. These are exactly the same questions I talk with companies, with organizations, big and small, with startups and with my students. So the left side diagram. Do you have a clear objectives? How clear are they? Does everybody understand them in your organization? What's the connection between individual projects and the goals you're having? And one of the themes of this conference, the last one, what's our societal mission? All this talk about sustainability, all this about having a purpose, how does it fit in? It's part of these goals, isn't it? And then, of course, the other side, the audiences. So who are our strategic audiences? Are we serving everybody? Yes, we are, but some of them are more important than others for reasons A, B, and C. Our audiences, are they a group? Are they individuals? Are they a network? Having these kind of discussions as well. And when it comes to all the world we live in with the data, analytics, having the internet and everything part of the museum, we're getting information and evidence. What are our audiences doing and how they're behaving? How are we bringing that information here? And only then when we bring these together and have a good understanding of these, we can start creating these meaningful, strategic, impactful technology or solutions or exhibitions or what do you call them? Just bringing these two together. And then it serves you as the museum as well as the audiences. And just to really underline kind of where I started, that I don't think there is no difference whether you're in the digital space, the physical space, or the both. You should have these things clear. I wouldn't, if I was an organization leader, I would not have a separate digital strategy, not a separate sustainability strategy, not a separate something strategy. I would have a strategy. would include the vision, the mission, and all of that as well. And kind of my final point for you, and now having the privilege of working with people in cultural institutions and museums, and at the same time working quite a lot with business organizations. It's as simple as I presented, believe me. And working with people with the background you have is that you are very much capable of reading into this stuff. It's not complexity. At least in Finland, many people think that business and all of it's so much about mathematics and numbers. Of course it isn't. It's about leadership, it's about communication, it's about having a dialogue, it's bringing people together. So I just, for you, curated, if you will, this collection of a couple of books and free sources where you can go and dig out. And I'm going to share these slides with you, so you can definitely get access to them. So have a look, But also for those who are leading these organizations, also means that you need to allocate time for people to learn a little bit. In this change, you need to have people time to educate themselves and bring that knowledge into this. That's it. Thank you. Kiitos. Köszönöm.